The small newsroom smelled of stale coffee and printer ink. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, a single young reporter sat hunched over her desk, poring through pages of forgotten files and half-read articles. She had just started at the Independence Journal, a local paper with no budget and little readership, but big ambitions. Jane Thompson was trying to make a name for herself, trying to prove she had what it took to uncover the truth in a world where the truth was often buried beneath layers of corruption and self-interest. Her desk was cluttered with old notebooks, her laptop screen flashing with notifications from the wire services, and a pile of manila folders stacked to her left. But it was the email she had received this morning that caught her attention. The subject line was simple, too simple, and sent a chill through her. A secret no one should know. She opened the email cautiously, already suspicious of the unknown sender. The message was short, with an attachment labeled Senator Mayfield, the Brotherhood. No signature, no greeting, just a link. No return address. The words lingered in her mind, a secret no one should know. Senator Thomas Mayfield was a household name. A staunch conservative, the embodiment of family values, patriotism, and the moral backbone of the Republican Party. He had spent years positioning himself as the unshakable champion of everything traditional, publicly opposing everything from same-sex marriage to abortion rights. He was a man who preached morality to the masses, with a polished image of an ideal father and husband. But no one, except those in his closest circles, knew the real Thomas Mayfield. Jane had covered his speeches before, watched him weave speeches that sounded like sermons, stirring patriotic fervor, bashing Washington elites, and casting himself as the real American hero. She had even interviewed him once. His firm handshake, his deep blue eyes, his perfectly pressed suits, all part of the carefully constructed persona he presented to the world. But the tip in her inbox suggested there was much more to him than the public face he presented. The file was encrypted, and after a few minutes of fruitless attempts to crack the code, she decided to forward it to someone she trusted. That someone was Mike Cartwright, the paper's senior investigative reporter and the closest thing Jane had to a mentor. Cartwright was a veteran in the game, having spent years uncovering scandal after scandal, mostly in local politics, but occasionally diving into national-level stories that had big implications. Mike was known for one thing: digging until the very last stone was overturned, no matter how deep it was buried. She pressed send. Within minutes, Mike called her. "Thompson," his gravelly voice crackled through the phone. "What the hell is this? Why didn't you come to me first?" "I thought I'd let you look at it," she said, trying to sound confident, though she could feel the weight of his disapproval over the line. "Listen, kid," Mike continued, "this could be big, but we don't chase rumors. The Independence Journal is already barely hanging on as it is. One wrong move, and we'll be buried before we even get started. We go public with something like this without solid proof, and it'll be the end of us. But, Mike, look at it. There's something there. You can feel it, right?" Jane pressed, her voice urgent. All right," he said, his tone softening. "I'll take a look. But if this is some smear campaign or someone's petty revenge, you better be ready to back it up. The last thing we need is to be dragged through the mud on some political vendetta." Jane's heart raced. She was certain this was something worth investigating, though. The lack of any real leads, the anonymity of the tip, everything about it screamed real. Mike arrived at the newsroom an hour later, looking as disheveled as usual in his worn leather jacket and creased jeans. He dropped his bag onto the desk and sank into the chair across from Jane, already cracking his knuckles. "This better not be a wild goose chase," he muttered, already scanning the encrypted attachment Jane had forwarded him. "You didn't break any protocols, right?" "I've been careful," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. No one knows about this except you, me, and, good, he interrupted. Let's see what we've got. Minutes passed as Mike sifted through the files, his brow furrowing. Jane watched him intently. There was something undeniably gripping about his focus. He had an uncanny ability to read between the lines, spotting inconsistencies and potential angles where others saw nothing but a tangle of words. I'll be damned, Mike muttered under his breath. This is no joke. He turned to Jane, his eyes wide. This is bigger than I thought. Mayfield is mixed up in something much darker than anyone imagined. Jane leaned in closer. What do you mean? Mike tapped the screen, highlighting a series of transactions, offshore accounts, real estate deals under false names, and suspiciously well-timed donations to Mayfield's campaign fund. All of it was traced back to a series of elite gatherings, ones that didn't appear on any public records, involving some of the wealthiest, most powerful figures in the country. Men who had no visible ties to each other, except one. The Brotherhood. The document described a secret society, one known for manipulating political figures, creating puppet politicians who would do their bidding in exchange for influence, power, and wealth. Mayfield, according to these files, had been involved for years, and the price for his loyalty was steep. His actions as a senator, his public persona, all were controlled by these faceless elites. Jane felt a chill down her spine. The very senator who claimed to be the moral compass of the nation, the one who spoke out against corruption, had built his career on the very thing he publicly condemned. She picked up the phone and dialed Mike's number again. I want to take this to the next level, she said, her voice tight with anticipation. No, he replied flatly. We're not running with this until we have more. This is a bombshell, Jane. But we need evidence that will stand up in court. Not just more files from an anonymous tipster. And we need to know who is behind this leak. If this is a setup, we'll be exposed. Jane understood the gravity of the situation. She knew this could be her big break, but it could also destroy her career before it even started. She needed more than just whispers and rumors, she needed hard evidence. I'll dig deeper, she promised. In the days that followed, Jane dug into Mayfield's financial history, tracing every lead she could find. What she discovered was disturbing. There were payments made to Mayfield's campaign by unknown entities, individuals who had no connection to any known interest groups or corporations. Then there were the trips. He had made several, under the guise of business or fundraising, but Jane found no record of any actual events tied to these trips. Late one night, while scrolling through a list of Mayfield's known associates, Jane found something strange. One name, in particular, kept coming up: Victor Graves, a real estate mogul known for his close ties to conservative groups. Graves had funded several of Mayfield's initiatives, and his name appeared again and again in the files. Jane's gut told her this was no coincidence. Graves was part of the elite group orchestrating the senator's rise. As she compiled the information, Jane couldn't shake the nagging feeling that someone was watching her. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number: "You're getting too close. Back off now." Her heart skipped a beat. Was this another threat, or a warning from someone trying to silence her? The message only deepened her resolve. She was in too deep now to turn back. The more Jane dug into Senator Mayfield's past, the darker the pit seemed to get. Each day, it felt like she was pulling at an endless string that only unraveled more corruption, more lies. What started as a simple tip-off from an anonymous source had now become a personal obsession. It was clear the senator had built an empire of influence, with deep ties to shadowy figures, and Jane was determined to expose it all. But as the days wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her every move, watching her closely, waiting for her to slip. Her desk was piled high with documents, receipts, and government reports. Mayfield's campaign finance records, once neatly filed away, now seemed like pieces of a complex puzzle that she couldn't solve fast enough. She had begun to suspect that the real story wasn't just about Mayfield's secret society, the Brotherhood, but also about the system that allowed figures like him to wield so much unchecked power. Jane had made one crucial discovery: Victor Graves, the real estate mogul whose name was tied to the most questionable donations and deals, had extensive ties with an international network of lobbyists. Graves' associates were involved in major financial backdoor dealings with foreign governments, deals that could compromise national security. And there, buried among the files, was the key: Mayfield had been directly involved in pushing legislation that benefited Graves' business interests, making him a silent partner in some of Graves' most lucrative ventures. It was clear that Mayfield had sold out to the highest bidder. But just as Jane felt like she was gaining ground, new complications arose. A mysterious figure from her past surfaced, someone she hadn't expected to see again, not in a million years. His name was David Sloan, a former journalist turned corporate spy, someone who had once mentored Jane before abruptly vanishing from the public eye. He had been involved in several high-profile investigative projects years ago, but his career had taken a nosedive after a scandal that had left his reputation in ruins. Jane had always admired his work, even after his fall from grace, but now he appeared out of nowhere, like a shadow on the periphery of her investigation. David's sudden reappearance was no accident. It was a Friday evening when Jane received an encrypted email from an unfamiliar account. The subject line read, "You're not alone in this." The email contained a cryptic message, urging her to meet David Sloan at a dingy bar in an industrial part of town. She felt uneasy. David was not a man she trusted anymore, not after his past, not after what happened to him, but she couldn't ignore the possibility that he could hold the missing pieces to the puzzle. Against her better judgment, Jane went. The bar was dimly lit, with a sense of desolation hanging in the air. The only patrons were a few solitary figures nursing beers in the corner, their faces hidden beneath the shadows. Jane sat at the far end of the bar, her eyes scanning the room nervously, when a man in his early 40s approached her. David Sloan hadn't changed much. His hair was graying at the temples, and his once immaculate suit now seemed a bit too loose, like it had been hastily put on. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his movements were deliberate, as if he were always calculating his next step. "Jane Thompson," David said with a knowing smile. "I see you've come a long way since we last spoke." "Don't pretend you care," she shot back, her voice tight with mistrust. "What do you want?" David sat down across from her, his expression unreadable. "I've been following your investigation into Mayfield. I know you're in deep now. You're playing a dangerous game, Jane." "I'm not scared," Jane replied defiantly, but even she could feel the chill creeping into her spine. "I need to know what you know about Mayfield and Victor Graves. I know you were involved with them years ago. Were you part of this brotherhood?" David's eyes flickered. "Not directly," he said, lowering his voice. "But I did some work for Graves, years ago. He's got his hands in everything, every industry, every corrupt corner of this country. And Mayfield is the perfect puppet. He's been bought and sold 100 times over, Jane. You don't know the half of it." Jane leaned in, her heart pounding. "Then why didn't you tell me sooner? Why now?" David hesitated for a moment, then spoke, his voice barely audible. "Because this isn't just about Mayfield. This goes deeper. There's a web of people behind him, people in power who will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. If you expose him, you'll be exposing them all. And they won't let you live long enough to tell the story." For the first time in weeks, Jane felt a real sense of fear. The shadowy figures that had been behind Mayfield's rise to power were more dangerous than she had imagined. But she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close. The meeting with David left Jane more conflicted than ever. Part of her wanted to walk away, to forget the investigation and protect herself, but the other part, her journalist's instinct, demanded that she press on. She spent the next few days working late into the night, poring over more records, tracing money trails, and following up on the names David had given her. One night, while investigating a property deal between Mayfield and an anonymous foreign entity, Jane stumbled upon a chilling discovery. The deal was linked to a Russian oligarch, one with known connections to money laundering operations and illicit arms deals. And Mayfield had personally approved the deal, using his power to push it through the Senate with little oversight. Her heart sank. This was no longer just about power and greed. It was about national security, and Mayfield had sold his country down the river for the sake of profit. Just as Jane was preparing to confront Mike Cartwright with her findings, something unexpected happened. The very next morning, she woke to find her apartment ransacked. Her computer, hard drives, and every file she had compiled for the investigation were gone. The place had been meticulously searched. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized the truth. Someone had been following her, someone who knew exactly what she was working on. She grabbed her phone and called Mike, her heart racing as she spoke. "It's happening, Mike. They know. They've been watching me." Mike's voice was calm but urgent. "Jane, you need to disappear. Now. This is bigger than we thought. They've been covering their tracks for years. And you're too close to exposing them." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Her heart stopped. She tried calling him back, but the call wouldn't go through. Something was terribly wrong. The weight of the situation hit her all at once. The people behind Mayfield and Graves weren't just corrupt businessmen or politicians, they were part of a far-reaching network that extended across borders, governments, and industries. And now, Jane was in too deep. The ringing phone was deafening in the quiet apartment, a sharp contrast to the mess of papers strewn across the floor. Jane sat at her desk, heart racing, her eyes darting to the empty files where her research once was. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone, praying it wasn't another dead call. The screen flashed with a number she recognized, Mike Cartwright. She pressed the green button, trying to steady her voice. "Mike? Get out of there, Jane." Mike's voice came through with urgency. "I don't know how long you've got before they come for you." "I know," Jane said, voice shaky but resolute. "My apartment's been cleaned out. I'm already on the move." There was a pause. "It's bigger than just Mayfield and Graves. The Brotherhood, Jane, they're not just political operatives. They're the ones pulling the strings behind some of the biggest financial and military deals in the world. And they've been watching you since the moment you took that tip." A cold knot formed in Jane's stomach. She had been so focused on the immediate threats, the missing files, the cryptic messages, that she hadn't allowed herself to fully comprehend the scale of the forces she was up against. She was no longer just a journalist, she was a pawn in a global conspiracy. "Where are you now?" Mike asked. "I'm headed to the old printing warehouse. I've got copies of everything. It's the last place I can go before they catch up with me." "Don't trust anyone," Mike warned. "And don't make the mistake of thinking you're alone. I know you think you're in this by yourself, but you're not. I'll try to meet you there, but you have to move quickly." Jane hung up and grabbed the small bag she had hastily packed. The adrenaline coursed through her veins. She was too close now. She couldn't back out. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a hulking structure of steel and brick, long abandoned and forgotten. Jane had been there only once, during a hazy night filled with the smells of must and old ink. It was fitting, in a way, this was where the press had once uncovered hidden stories, where truth had been printed and sent into the world. And it was here that she would now unveil the truth about Mayfield, Graves, and the Brotherhood. Her eyes darted around as she approached the door. The street was empty, save for the distant hum of traffic. She pulled her collar up, checking every corner, every shadow. There was no way she would be caught off guard. Not again. The door creaked as she pushed it open, stepping into the darkened space. Inside, the large open room was filled with stacks of old printing materials. The faint smell of ink lingered in the air. She made her way toward the back, where she had hidden the documents in a long-abandoned filing cabinet. As she opened the drawer, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. Her heart skipped. "This is it." "Hello?" Jane answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "You think you're going to take us down, Jane?" The voice was cold, chilling, and unmistakably familiar. It was David Sloan. "You should have listened when I warned you. You've dug too deep." Her blood ran cold. "David, what do you want?" "To make sure you don't ruin everything I've worked for," David replied, his voice growing more menacing. "You think you've uncovered the truth, but you're just a piece in a much bigger game. The Brotherhood? You think exposing Mayfield will stop anything? You're a fool." "I'm not stopping," Jane shot back. "You know as well as I do what they've been doing. This isn't just about Mayfield. It's about everything: corruption, betrayal, lives ruined. You're part of it. You knew what they were doing, and you still helped them." David let out a dry laugh. "I never claimed to be a hero, Jane. But you're in over your head." There was a sudden click. Burst of static. And then, silence. Before Jane could react, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway leading into the warehouse. Her breath caught in her throat. They were here. She ducked behind a pile of crates, clutching the files to her chest, praying that the shadows would hide her long enough. She could hear the faint whispers of voices, too close for comfort. The click of boots on concrete. They were hunting her. Just as Jane was beginning to think she was trapped, a figure stepped into view. It was Mike Cartwright, his face grim but determined. "Jane," he hissed, crouching beside her. "We don't have much time." "They're coming for me, Mike," she whispered. "David Sloan is part of this. He's been working for them the whole time." "I know," Mike said, his voice steady. "But we don't have much time. You've got to get the information to the press. If we go public now, we can make sure they can't stop it. There's no going back after this." Jane nodded, feeling a surge of hope. But then a voice echoed from the doorway, Victor Graves' voice. "I know you're here, Mike." "Jane. You've already gone too far." Jane's eyes widened. Graves had tracked them down. And with him, a dozen men. All heavily armed. This was it. "You're surrounded," Graves said, stepping into the room, his voice calm, almost amused. "No one's going to believe your story. The Brotherhood controls everything: media, law enforcement, and even the damn courts. This is over." But Jane wasn't ready to give up. Not after everything she had uncovered, not after everything that had been sacrificed. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Jane muttered under her breath. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small USB drive. "You won't get away with this." Mike shot her a look, as if understanding her plan. He stood tall, eyes locking with Graves, his voice full of authority. "Get her," Graves commanded, his face twisted in fury. But it was too late. With a quick motion, Jane slotted the USB drive into her laptop and hit send. The files began uploading to every major news outlet, every investigative reporter who had ever helped her. The story, the evidence, everything was going live. There was no stopping it now. The room seemed to freeze as the data streamed out into the world. Jane's heart raced, her pulse thumping in her ears. Then, as if on cue, the sound of sirens filled the air. Jane's head whipped toward the door. Police. The authorities had arrived. The next few weeks felt like a blur. As soon as the story hit the news, the fallout was immediate. National TV stations picked up the exposé. Investigations were launched. Mayfield was arrested, his ties to the Brotherhood publicly revealed. The truth about Graves' international dealings, the money laundering, and arms trafficking all came to light. The scandal rocked the country, sending shockwaves through Washington. Jane's life was never the same. Her face was now recognized across the nation. She had become a symbol of journalistic integrity, of standing up to the corrupt powers that controlled so much of the country. But the victory came at a cost. David Sloan was nowhere to be found, and rumors of him being silenced by his former allies swirled. Mike Cartwright, ever the mentor, had disappeared too. Rumor had it he was being watched, forced to lay low to avoid retaliation. As for Jane, she walked away from the Independence Journal to start anew. But she knew one thing: her fight wasn't over. There were still more stories to uncover, more powerful figures to expose. And this time, she would be ready.